Okay, let's just dive right in, shall we? You know that sinking feeling. You sign a contract, you think everything's sorted, and then someone breaks their promise. It's so frustrating. And it really boils down to one huge question. All right, let's imagine this is you. You hire somebody for a job, you've got a contract, and they break a promise. A big one. So, can you just walk away? Can you just say, nope, deal's off, and end the whole thing right there? I mean, it feels like you should be able to, right? Well, you might be surprised to hear that the answer isn't a simple yes or no. In the eyes of the law, it's a bit more complicated. See, it's not just about if a promise was broken. The real question is what kind of promise was broken. The law actually has this whole system for sorting promises by how important they are. And believe me, that changes everything.
Okay, to really get a handle on this, let's use a super simple example. Let's say you're starting a business, and you hire a web developer to build you this amazing new website. You've got the contract all signed, you've agreed on every little detail, and then, well, things start to go a bit sideways.
So, let's look at two ways this could go wrong. In scenario A, the developer gets the color of your logo wrong. It's supposed to be sky blue, they use navy blue. Super annoying, right? But the site itself works just fine. Now, scenario B. The developer builds a site, but the checkout page, the part where customers actually pay you, is completely busted. Nobody can buy a single thing. I mean, that's not just annoying, that's an absolute catastrophe for your business.
So here's the question. Should the consequences for the developer be the same in both cases? Should a color mistake be treated the same as a totally broken checkout page? No way, right? Of course not. And thankfully, contract law is right there with you on that one.
So, how does the law actually do this? Well, it's pretty clever. It sorts all the promises in a contract, which lawyers call terms, into 3 different buckets. Let's take a look at what they are. First up, we've got something called a condition, and this one is the big kahuna. A condition is a promise that is so fundamental, so absolutely crucial to the whole point of the contract. Think about our website. A working checkout page? That's a condition. Without it, what's the point of an online store? It's like the load-bearing wall of the entire project. If it's gone, the whole thing comes crashing down. Okay, next up is the warranty. Now this is a much less critical promise. It's more of a minor detail, something that, if broken, doesn't really destroy the whole purpose of the deal. That wrong shade of blue for the logo? Classic warranty. Yeah, it's technically a breach of the contract, but it's like painting a room the wrong color. The house is still standing, you can still live in it. And then there's the mysterious third category, the innominate term. This is for all those promises that aren't obviously a huge deal breaker or just a tiny detail. They're kind of in a gray area. So the law doesn't label them ahead of time. Instead, it takes a wait-and-see approach. It waits to see what actually happens when the promise is broken.
Okay, so we have these 3 types of terms. What happens when one of them gets broken? Well, your options, what the law calls your remedies, are totally different depending on which bucket that promise was in.
All right, this table really spells it out for us. Look here, if someone breaks a condition, that load-bearing wall, you get the nuclear option. You can walk away from the contract, just end it completely, and you can sue them for money. But if they break a warranty, that minor detail, notice the big no there? You can't end the contract. Your only option is to sue for damages. And that mysterious innominate term, it's got that little maybe emoji, and we're about to find out why.
This is so important to get. For that minor breach, the wrong shade of blue, you can't just fire the developer and rip up the contract. The law says you have to stick with the deal. Now, you can absolutely sue for any financial loss that color mistake caused, but the contract itself is still alive. And you know, this is exactly why it's so important to spell out what the real deal breakers are in the contract before you even start.
All right, let's talk about that maybe. The tricky one, the innominate term. How on earth does a court decide whether it's a big deal or a small one? How do they figure out if you get to walk away or if you just get some cash? It all boils down to one simple but really powerful idea. For these in-between promises, the court looks at the effect of the breach. They ask one question: how bad was it, really? Did what happened completely wreck the main reason you signed the contract in the first place?
Basically, it all comes down to one single factor: seriousness. If the consequences of the breach are serious, it gets treated like a broken condition, and you can end the contract. If the consequences are minor, it gets treated like a broken warranty, and you can only sue for damages. The effect of the breach, that's the whole ballgame.
Okay, so now we've got the whole framework down. We know about conditions, warranties, and those tricky innominate terms. So, let's put that knowledge to the test. Let's see if we can spot the statement that's just plain wrong.
Okay, have a look at this. This statement claims that the remedy for breaking a warranty is to make the contract void. Based on what we've just covered, does that sound right to you? Think about it for a second.
If you felt a little alarm bell go off in your head, you were absolutely right. That statement is totally incorrect, and understanding why it's wrong is super important.
So let's get this straight. Making a contract void is like using a time machine to go back and make sure it never happened. It's erased, wiped from history. But the remedy for a warranty breach isn't nearly that dramatic. You just get damages, which is just a legal term for money to make up for the loss. It's kind of like getting a discount because the new phone you bought has a tiny scratch on the back. The sale still happened, you still have the phone, but you're getting compensated for that minor flaw.
Okay, so let's do a super quick recap. Breach a condition. That's serious. You can terminate the contract and sue for damages. Breach a warranty. That's minor. You can only sue for damages. And an intimate term? Well, it all depends on the seriousness of what happened.
And that brings us to the final takeaway. The next time you're in a situation where a contract gets messy and a promise gets broken, you'll know that the first question to ask isn't just, can I end this whole thing? The real first question is, okay, how important was that promise really? Was it a load-bearing wall, or was it just the color of the paint?